Malmö and Stockholm, Hede Hubert and Folke Berenius, 201B. If you can show me your manual score on the management group. Execution 7, 8, 7, 7.5. Synchronization 7.5, 7.5, 8, 7, 7.5. Representing Denmark, Rasmus Altoft and Jonas Helms, 401B. Execution 7.5, 6.5, 6, 6. Synchronization 7, 7, 7.5, 7, 7. Representing Gothenburg Diving, Albin Helling and Linus Ikonen, 401B. Execution 7, 6.5, 6, 6. Synchronization 7.5, 7, 4.5, 6.5, 6.5. Representing Team Finland, Eino Kilpainen and Veikka Kaupinen, 103B. Execution 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Synchronization 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Representing Croatia, Luka Martinovic and Mate Neveshkanin, 401B. Execution 8, 7.5, 8, 8.5. Synchronization 8, 8, 8, 7.5, 8. And moving on to the girls synchro. Elisa Klepsvik and Sabina Gustafsson, 101B. Execution 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Synchronization 5.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Representing Bergen Diving, Hermine Svensson and Karen Simpson, 401B. Execution 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Representing Jönköping diving, Nova Corner and Felicia Gis, 201B. Execution 6.5, 5, 5, 6. Synchronization 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Representing Västerås diving, Vilma Ekstedt and Emma Ricatti, 5231D. Execution 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Synchronization 6, 7, 7, 6, 6.5. Representing Gothenburg diving, Emma Hurlick and Iris Lindelof, 103B. Execution 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Synchronization 7, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Robin Moore and Maya Rono, 401B. Execution 6, 5.5, 5, 5. Synchronization 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Representing Team Finland, Hayu Aulio and Ella Hyttinen, 401B. Execution 7, 6.5, 6, 7.5. Synchronization 7, 7, 7, 6, 7. Representing Ryan Charlotte Springen, Merit Buckman and Mia Friedel, 301B. Execution 6.5, 5.5, 4, 4. Synchronization 6, 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5. Representing Gothenburg diving, Nika Holmberg and Ingrid Lundstam, 103B. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Representing Gothenburg Diving, Laura Bergen and Zoe London, 103B. Execution, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Emma Nolan and Claudia Pizzoni, 401B. Execution, 7, 6, 5, 5. Synchronization, 7, 6.5, 7, 6, 7. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Alicia Hills and Leah Safi, 401B. Execution, 6, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Hannah Gray and Emma Kelly, 201B. Execution, 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Synchronization, 8, 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Catherine Leshner and Keratili Manaka, 103B. Execution, 6.5, 7, 7, 7. Synchronization, 6, 7, 7.5, 7, 6.5. Representing Spin and Bergen Diving, Isabella Felder and Audrey Gabra, 301B. Execution, 7, 6, 5.5, 6. Synchronization, 6, 6, 6. 5.5, 5.5. And moving on to the second round. Peter and Volker, 401B. Execution 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Synchronization 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7. Christmas and your last 201B. Execution 7, 7, 6, 6. Synchronization 7, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Alvin and Linus 201B. Execution 5, 6, 7, 7. Synchronization 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Ado and Baker 301B. Execution 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5. Synchronization 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Luca and Matai 201B. Execution 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Synchronization 8, 8.5, 8, 8.5, 8. Moving on to round 2 of the girls. Elisa and Sabina, 401C. Execution 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Sabina and Karen 201B. Execution 4, 4.5, 6, 6. Synchronization 5.5, 5, 5, 6.5, 6. Nova and Felicia, 301B. Execution 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Synchronization 7, 6, 7, 6.5, 7. Vilma and Emma, 201B. Execution 7, 7, 6.5, 7. Synchronization 6.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Emma and Iris, 201B. Execution 6, 6.5, 5.5, 3. Synchronization 6.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Robin and Maya, 201B. Execution 5.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Synchronization 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Caillou and Ella, 5231D. Execution 5.5, 4.5, 6.5, 6.5. Synchronization 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Merritt and Mia, 401B. Execution 7, 6, 6.5, 7. Synchronization 7, 7, 6, 6, 7. Nikkei and Ingrid, 201B. Execution 5.5, 6, 4.5, 4. Synchronization 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Laura and Zoe, 201B. Execution and a half, 6, 6 and a half. Synchronization, 6, 6, 7, 6 and a half, 5 and a half. Emma and Claudia, 103B. Execution, 5, 3 and a half, 4 and a half, 3 and a half. Synchronization, 4 and a half, 5, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half. Alicia and Leah, 101B. Execution, 5, 4 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Synchronization, 5 and a half, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 6. Hannah and Emma, 301B. Execution, 7, 7 and a half, 6 and a half, 7. Synchronization. Sorry, we'll just re-announce. Execution, 7, 7 and a half, 6 and a half, 7. Synchronization, 7, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7, 7 and a half. Catherine and Keratile, 301B. Execution, 6, 5 and a half, 6, 6 and a half. Synchronization, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7. Isabella and Audrey, 201B. Execution, 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 6, 5 and a half. Synchronization, 6 and a half, 6, 7, 6, 6. Moving on to round 3. Starting with the boys, Peter and Volker, 205B. Execution, 6, 6, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Synchronization, 6, 7, 7 and a half, 7, 7. Rasmus and Jonas, 105B. Execution, 6 and a 6 and a half, 3 and a half, 3 and a half. Synchronization, 5 and a half, 4 and a half. My apologies. Just having some technical difficulties. Execution, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 3 and a half, 3 and a half. Synchronization, 5 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 5, 5 and a half. Alvin and Linus, 5, 2, 3, 3D. Execution, 4 and a half, 5 and a half, 6, 6. Synchronization, 5 and a half, 6 and a half, 5 and a half, 6, 5 and a half. Ano and Baker, 405C. Execution, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half. Synchronization, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Luca and Mattei, 405B. Execution, 7, 7, 7, 7 and a half. Synchronization, 7, 7, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half. And moving on to round 3 of the girls. Elisa and Sabina, 103C. Execution, 6, 6, 5, 4 and a half. Synchronization, 5 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 6. Amina and Karen, 301B. Execution, 3 and a half, 2, 4 and a half, 4 and a half. Synchronization, 3, 3 and a half, 3, 3, 3 and a half. Laura and Felicia, 105B. Execution, 7, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half. Synchronization, 6 and a half, 7, 7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half. Vilma and Emma, 205C. Execution, 6, 5, 4 and a half, 5. Synchronization 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Emma and Eunice, 403B. Execution 3, 2.5, 5, 5. Synchronization 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Robin and Maya, 301B. Execution 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Synchronization 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5. Caillou and Ella, 105B. Execution 6, 6, 5, 5.5. Synchronization 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Merit and Mia, 405C. Execution 2.5, 2, 4.5, 4.5. Synchronization 5, 4, 4, 6, 4.5. DK and Ingrid, 301B. Execution 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization 6, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Laura and Zoe, 403B. Execution 7, 6.5, 5.5, 5. Synchronization 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5. Emma and Claudia, 201B. 1.5, 4. Synchronization, 1, a half, 1.5, a half, 2. Alicia and Leo, 2 and 1B. Execution, 5, 4.5, 3.5, 3. Synchronization, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Hannah and Emma, 105B. Execution, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Catherine and Kerosene, 105B. Execution, 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Synchronization, 6, 6.5, 7.5, 7, 6.5. Isabella and Audrey, 5233D. Execution, 5.5, 5, 5.5, 6. Synchronization, 6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6.5. And moving on to the boys. Round 4, Peter and Volker, 305B. Execution, 5.5, 5.5, 7.5, 7. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Rasmus and Jonas, 405C. Execution, 5.5, 5, 4, 3.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Alvin and Linus, 105B. Execution, 5.5, 4.5, 6, 6. Synchronization, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5. Ano and Baker, 205C. Execution, 4, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization, 6.5, 6, 6, 6, 5.5. Luca and Matai, 107B. Execution, 6, 7.5, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7. And moving on to round 4 of the girls. Anissa and Sabina, 201C. Execution, 5, 5, 5, 4.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Hermina and Karen, 103B. Execution, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Nova and Felicia, 405C. Execution, 6, 6, 4.5, 5.5. Synchronization, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Hilda and Emma, 105B. Execution, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Synchronization, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6. Emma and Iris, 105C. Execution, 5, 4.5, 6, 5.5. Synchronization, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Robin and Maya, 403B. Execution, 6, 5, 4.5, 4. Synchronization, 3.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Mayu and Ella, 405C. Execution 5, 6, 5, 5. Synchronization 6, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Direct ampere 203 feet. Execution 6, 4, 4.5, 3.5. Synchronization 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5, 4. DK and Ingrid 5231D. Execution 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Synchronization 5.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5. Nora and Zoe 5233D. Execution 6, 6.5, 5, 4. Synchronization 5.5 from all judges. Emma and Claudia 301B. Execution 5, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Synchronization 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Alicia and Leah 301B. Execution 4.5, 4, 4.5, 5. Synchronization 5, 5, 5, 5.5, 5.5. Hannah and Emma 405C. Execution 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Synchronization 6, 7, 6, 6.5, 6. Catherine and Keratili 405C. synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5, 5. Isabella and Audrey, 203B. Execution, 6, 6, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5, 6, 6.5. And moving on to the final round of dives. Representing Malmö and Stockholm, Peter Hubert and Volker Veridius, 107B. Execution, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Synchronization, 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5, 6. Representing Denmark, Rasmus Arntoft and Jonas Held, 305C. Execution, 6, 5.5, 3, 2.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 4.5, 2.5, 4, 4.5. Representing Gothenburg Diving, Alvin Helling and Lina Sikonen, 403B. Execution, 6.5, 5.5, 7, 6.5. Synchronization, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Representing Team Finland, Eino Pilkanainen and Veikka Kaupinen, 305C. Execution, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Synchronization, 7. Oh, synchronization, 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 6. Representing Croatia, Luka Martinovic and Mataj Neveschanin, 5154B. Execution, 7, 6, 4.5, 3. Synchronization, 6, 6.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. And moving on to the final round for the girls. Elisa Klepsvik and Sabina Gustafsson, 301C. Execution, 5, 5, 3. Sorry. Was that a purposeful beat? Oh, was it? Oh. I'm sorry, that was a failed dive. Representing Bergen diving, Havina Sorensen and Karen Stinson, 403C. Execution, 2.5, 3, 5, 5.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 4.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Representing Ian Shipping Diving, Nova Corner and Felicia Gis, 5132D. Execution, 5.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6. Synchronization, 6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Representing Westeros Diving, Vilma Eksted and Emma Ricatti, 405C. Execution, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 5. Synchronization, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Representing Gothenburg Diving, Emma Hurluk and Iris Linderoth, 5132D. Execution, 5.5, 3.5, 5.5, 5.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5, 4.5. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Robin Moore and Maya Rono, 5132D. Execution, 4.5, 4, 6, 5.5. Synchronization, 4.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5. Representing Team Finland, Paju Olio and Ella Hutanen, 205C. Execution, 5, 5.5, 4, 4. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 4.5. Representing Rheinzischer diving, Merit Bachmann and Mia Friedel, 105B. Execution, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Representing Gothenburg diving, Inga Holmberg and Ingrid Nunstam, 105C. Execution, 3, 3.5, 5, 5.5. Synchronization, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Representing Gothenburg and Paxhaw, Laura Bergen and Zoe London, 105B. Execution, 5.5, 5, 4, 3. Synchronization, 5, 5, 5, 5.5, 6. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Emma Nolan and Claudia Mazzoni, 403C. Can you hold up your score just for now? Execution, 4, 1.5, 4, 3.5. Synchronization, a half, 0, a half, a half, 0. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Alicia Goss and Leah Safi, 403B. Execution, 3, 4, 3.5, 3. Synchronization, 3.5, 4, 2, 4.5, 4.5. Representing Hungary, Panik Joy and Emma Kelly, 405C. Execution, 5.5, 5, 4.5, 5. Synchronization, 6, 5.5, 6, 5, 6. Representing Crusaders Diving Club, Catherine Leshner and Keritile Banaka, 5233 Execution, 4, 4.5, 6, 5. Synchronization, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5. And representing spin diving and Bergen diving, Isabella Milner and Audrey Narborough, 105B. Execution, 3.5, 4, 6, 6. Synchronization, 6, 5, 4.5, 5.5, 5. Thank you divers, thank you judges, thank you officials. We will have the results for you in just a moment. Can I take the time to tell any coaches joining us for 8 o'clock that we will be meeting outside of Ardo Arena at 7:45 instead of meeting at each hotel separately.